certainly the First Amendment, most people still say we should defend the First Amendment, the right of free speech. But, you know, in this age of political correctness, sometimes it isn't well protected. And when we think of the grand opportunities we have on the internet, and something I defend wholeheartedly because on principle, I don't want the federal government, that's where I have the jurisdiction as a federal official, I don't want the federal government ever to regulate or tax the internet.
Yes.
Yet today, in this post 9/11 atmosphere, so much has been done to erode the privacy of individuals. They can get warrantless searches, know what we're doing with our emails and our mail, and all the lists that the government contains. That you have secret prisons and all these kind of things that are undermining the very essence of America. Even today, in these last few years, the principle of habeas corpus, that is, you can't be held in prison unless the government states why you're being held in prison. And that is being shunned aside. So, unfortunately, the message I have for you young people is that you're inheriting a bad situation. It's bad because it's an attack on your personal freedom. It's an attack on the Constitution. Our economic conditions are in shambles. Even the prosperity we have today is sort of a figment of our imagination because most of it is on borrowed money. And most people are in debt. Most corporations are in debt. And certainly our government's in debt. And you're the government. And here we're giving you a government obligation. There's a national debt of nearly $10 trillion. We as a country are the greatest debtor nation in the world. In all of history, we owe about $2.6 trillion to foreigners. So they own us. We cannot run our welfare state or fight the war without borrowing from countries like China. And then, if you look at your other obligation as young people, there's $60 to $70 trillion of obligation to people who are in the entitlement system. And you say, well, isn't that necessary? How are these people going to get taken care of if we don't have the entitlement system? Well, the whole thing is, if we continue to do what we're doing, nobody's going to be taken care of at all because your tax rates will have to be 80%. So my argument is, why don't we change it before we have a real crisis in loss of liberty, a crisis in our economy? And believe me, we have our answers. The answers are here. Because there are certain areas where we spend money that it's a lot easier to cut than in other areas. So a lot of it should be cut. If you look at the Constitution, look at Article 1, Section 8, and read it carefully, there's very little the federal government is supposed to be doing. If you want government locally, that's one thing, and that's legal and permissible. But actually, the federal government's not supposed to run our schools, to tell you the truth. The people here at home. Department of Education or No Child Left Behind or whatever, you know, there used to be, the Republican Party used to stand for getting rid of a lot of that, and yet we as a party now have failed. We have doubled the size of the Department of Education, and it doesn't make it any easier for your school officials and your teachers, because right now, it used to be that the teachers and the administrations would come to my office and they'd argue different cases. But they come both together. The teachers, the students, the administrators argue, we don't need any more help from the federal government. We want less help. But the point here is, if we want the federal government to run our public school system around the country, you have to change the Constitution. It's not authorized. And if you want it, change it. But if you ignore it and just do it, then you've done it. And if it's wrong, then of course it hurts education. At the same time, it undermines our Constitution. But we know we have the economic problems. We know we have the debt. We know we have the attack on our civil liberties and our personal privacy. But the one area that I've talked about a long time, and especially in the debates, I've gotten a lot of attention on it, and it got the young people to look at our website and join the campaign. And that has to do with foreign policy. Because very obviously and very clearly, I had a different position of all the other candidates in the race. There have been 11 candidates in the Republican primary. Now we're down to 2, so we're doing pretty well. There's only 2 left in the race. But even when there were 11 11 candidates, it was very clear that I had a different position because I took a strict constitutional position on when we go to war. And I said we only should go to war when it's declared by the Congress. It should never be to go in to enforce UN resolution, and it should never be done because the executive branch of government decides to do it. If we did it that way, we would be fighting a lot less wars, and then if we did have to declare war, I believe we would win them and not have these protracted wars that we have today. Read your history carefully. You will read what Jefferson and Washington and the early presidents talk about. They said, stay out of entangling alliances, stay out of the internal affairs of other nations, trade with countries, be friends with countries, but don't get involved in these internal squabbles because it would be not good for us. And we haven't taken that advice in this past century. Since World War I, we've been so engaged in getting involved in everybody's battle. The tragedy is we've been on both sides of most of these wars. And in a way, that's exactly what we're doing in the Middle East today. We're arming both sides over there. We're literally arming the side that is allied with the Iranians, and then we complain about the Iranians stirring up trouble. Well, there's one way I would resolve the kind of mess we have over in the Middle East. I would obey the Constitution, and I would say it's time to end the war. It's time to bring our troops home. It's an illegal, undeclared war, and the sooner we come home, the better.